All right, everybody, we are back and we are here to talk about body number 1. So this will be our first body paragraph. We already have our introduction finished. If you have not watched that video yet, you are on the wrong video. Please go back to the introduction and get the information that you need and then come back to this one. That being said, let's look at what we need to be talking about in body paragraph number 1. It says step number 2, body number 1 is tradition and conformity. So in the first body paragraph, focus on how each story presents tradition and the pressure to conform. Consider how the characters in both works respond to these traditions and the consequences of following without questioning these traditions. So, the first thing we can do, pretty simple. So, we have actually already created our topic sentence by creating our thesis statement. So, it's not identical because identical means they're exactly the same, but they are similar, meaning there's some things that are a little bit different. So, all we're going to do here is we are going to take the beginning part. So if all this paragraph is about is conforming and conformity, we only need our information up to conformity. So I'm going to copy this part of the sentence and I'm going to paste it right here. Okay. I'm just going to add a period because there was no period here. And then I need to change this all to be the blue font because that's what we are working with down here. Okay. So in both The Lottery by Shirley Jackson and Disney's Encanto, tradition pushes characters to conform. That directly addresses telling our reader what we're going to be talking about without saying the very generic and very juvenile, what I'm going to tell you about is, we don't want to say that. Okay. We already did the hard work by creating our thesis statement. So we just need that portion and we're copying and pasting it down here. In both The Lottery by Shirley Jackson and Disney's Encanto, tradition pushes characters to conform. Now, before we can go on anywhere, we kind of just did something that may have confused our reader. We used the word conform. Not everybody knows what that is. And so we kind of want to give a definition for that. You can find the definition that was in our reading. You can Google the definition of conformity. You can look at the definition of conformity and then reword it. One thing about Googling the definition and copying and pasting it exactly is maybe Google explains it in a way that you don't understand, and then you don't even understand your own essay. So it's important to come up with a definition of conformity that makes sense and can just be put into basic terms. It doesn't need to be overly specific. It doesn't need to have a crazy amount of detail as long as you know what conformity means. So we, before moving on, just need to clarify conformity is, and then you're going to put in your definition right here. What I would like for you to do is pause the video. Whenever you come back from the video, we are going to put conformity in italics because, again, just like how we did with traditions and the hook, it's a new word. But again, I want you to go find a definition of conformity. Ideally, go back to the stories. If you can't find it in the stories, ask for help. If you can't do that, then Google it. But again, try to put it mostly in your own words so that you understand it, because it is not going to do you any favors if you don't even understand the words you're putting in your essay. So pause, go find a definition of conformity, come back. Okay, I'm assuming that if you are back, you have your definition of conformity, and this spot is no longer blank. That is very, very important that this is not blank. If you still don't have a definition, please go get one. Okay, so we're going to kind of fill in, like I said in the last video, an essay is really just a formula. We're going to set ourselves up for success without having to go back and find any more information. I know you already had to find the definition of conformity, but you're not going to have to do that anymore today. We are going to come back as a class and find some evidence together that fits. You'll then be doing the explanations on your own. So we're going to kind of jump around right here for body paragraph number 1 and just fill in kind of like the structure, or again, the formula, so that we can plug things in later and then it'll all make sense. So let's see. Our evidence, keep in mind, we're talking about 2 different stories. It would not make sense for us to start talking about Disney's Encanto because we're telling our reader that we are going to start talking about the lottery because the lottery came first. So you'll notice we have evidence here and evidence here. This first one is going to be your lottery evidence. This second evidence is going to be your Encanto evidence, okay? So we need to clarify that. So in the lottery And then I'm just going to put the words transition, because we are going to transition right here. But we don't know what we're talking about yet, so we don't know what our transition word is going to be. So for now, trust me, just put the word transition, and then we're going to fill in our space for our quote when we eventually have it. Our author's last name is Jackson, and then eventually we are going to put a number there for our page number. One thing I do want to point out that I'm sure some of you are still going to accidentally do, and we're going to fix it. Right now, this number sign is just a placeholder. Eventually, let's say that it's on page 27, whatever we find. It would just say Jackson 27. We would not have Jackson number 27. Okay. So for now, that number sign is just a placeholder, but we will try to make sure that that is deleted later. Okay. It doesn't matter how long your line is for your evidence. We're going to put evidence in there eventually. So again, that's just a placeholder. So moving on, we're going to skip over our analysis right now because we don't have any evidence, so we can't analyze anything. But eventually, whenever we get here, the evidence that we would be looking for, which we're not doing right now, but the evidence that we would be looking for would be somewhere in the story that we can see those characters in the lottery conforming or following what the crowd is doing without questioning it. That is what we would be looking for there. So we're going to skip that. We're going to do our evidence for Encanto, which is going to be very, very similar. The only thing I forgot to do was to italicize the lottery because it's a story title. We're going to do the same thing with Encanto. So again, if you don't remember how to do that, in the top right of your screen, you're going to see an A button up here. I don't have that because I'm on a MacBook and not an iPad, but you're going to see an A button, and then you'll see an I button, very similar to this one that means italics. So that's just what you do whenever you hover over the lottery. If you can't get it out and figured out, ask one of your teachers. We will help you. Again, we are going to go to Disney's Encanto. So in Disney's Encanto, and so that I don't forget, I'm going to italicize that right now. In Disney's Encanto. And then again, we're going to have a transition because we always want to transition. Transition just means like, according to the text, according to the author states, the author says, any of those. But again, because we don't have our evidence just yet, we can't really put any transition in there because we don't know, is the author even saying anything? It wouldn't make sense to say the author says if the author's not saying anything. Okay. So again, we're just kind of creating a line for our evidence that we will eventually have. But what I already did is I went ahead and I looked up who the directors and producers were of Disney's Encanto. We already gave Disney credit over here, so we wouldn't cite that it was Disney. Their names are actually Bush and Howard, and the film was from 2021. So we would say Bush and Howard 2021. Okay, so that should hopefully make a little bit more sense there. Notice how we don't have a number because we know what the number is. There's no page number for a movie. It's just the year that it came out, as well as the director and producer's names, or last names, I guess I should say. So again, we can't really do any kind of analyzing because we don't have evidence in here or a specific thing from the story because we're not thinking about that yet. But if we go to our conclusion sentence, think about what we're talking about. We set up here in both The Lottery by Shirley Jackson and Disney's Encanto, tradition pushes characters to conform. Conformity is, and then whatever you said. So in order to close this paragraph, we can kind of restate, but also reword that thesis statement. So we could say both stories show how conforming to a group, while easier, can have negative results. That's the end of our paragraph 1. Now, I know that this one you have already filled out, and hopefully you have. If you have not, please, before you say, I'm finished, please make sure you find a conformity definition because we are not going to give this to you. We are going to go through tomorrow, or later on, I guess I should say, because I don't know our specific timeline, later, and we will fill these out as a class. We'll give you some options of the different ones you could use, and then we'll get into the analysis a little bit later. So if you are finished and you've got all of these things, I'm not going to read through this because right now it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because we just have the filled in information with a lot of blanks. But this is what your introduction from last time should look like, as well as your body number 1. Now, as we go into body paragraph number 2, which we're not at yet, we've already talked about conformity. So our body paragraph number 2 is going to have to be about making sacrifices to fit in, because up here, that's what it tells us it wants body number 2 to be about. But if you have all this, you are looking great. We will come back to this and fill this information out. Otherwise, you can end the video.